My good friend Randy, she said, did you get the sign-on bonus? I was like, what sign-on bonus? And she's like, the sign-on bonus, because they're so desperate and everything's so short. It's a 75,000 sign-on bonus. I said, no, and I already signed the contract. And she cursed and she said, well, rip the mother effer up. And I was like, you can't do that. I said, no, I can't do that. She's like, well, tell them you won't show up until they pay that. You can do that? You can do that. So I called the recruiter back. I told her my concerns. And over the phone, she's like, oh, yeah, we didn't do that? Oh, yeah, you get a sign-on bonus. It was 48 hours, and it was in my bank account. I just looked at it like, 70, wow. And that's when I became so vocal amongst my friend group. I'm like, we have to talk about this.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Pamela Buchanan, emergency physician, author, founder, and one of the most candid voices in medicine on the things doctors aren't supposed to talk about. Dr. Buchanan founded Melanated Medicine, a peer support network for Black women physicians, and has written extensively about burnout, racial inequity in medicine, and what it actually costs to be a Black woman in a white coat. She's a prolific author with books including White Coat, Black Face and The Oxygen Mask Principle. If you've ever wondered whether your colleagues make more than you and whether you'd have the nerve to ask, this episode is for you. If you've ever signed a contract without knowing if the number was fair or felt like you had to work twice as hard just to be taken seriously, this episode is for you too. And if you've ever wanted someone to just say the quiet parts out loud about race, pay, power in medicine, this episode is definitely for you. The question isn't whether these conversations are uncomfortable. They are. The question is what it costs to have you continue to avoid them. But before we get to Dr. Buchanan, a quick word from our sponsors. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our newest How I Doctor sponsor, Savaro. Savaro is a top telestroke and neurology company that was built to fix one of the most predictable failures in modern medicine, getting timely, consistent access to a neurologist when you actually need one. Their team of board-certified neurologists deliver rapid video response, clear decision-making support, and continuity from the first exam all the way through treatment planning and management. Hospitals working with Savaro see faster door-to-needle times, fewer transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. And because Savaro was built by physicians, the workflows actually match real-world medicine. If you need stronger, faster, and more predictable neurology coverage, visit Savaro.com to learn more. And now, let's get into today's episode. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Evidently. Evidently is the clinical data intelligence platform built to help physicians harness the ocean of patient data they're drowning in every day. From chart summarization to AI-assisted note drafting and denial appeal support, Evidently makes sure the right data shows up at the right time. Physicians using Evidently report spending less time hunting through charts and more time focusing on patient care. That's why they've become a trusted partner to health systems looking to improve documentation, quality, and revenue sustainability. The company is led by providers and AI researchers that are dedicated to reducing documentation burden and helping clinicians practice at the top of their license. If you want to see what Evidently can do for your hospital or your practice, reach out today at www.evidently.com. Now, let's get into today's episode. Dr. Pamela Buchanan, welcome to How I Doctor.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on. Thanks for all the kind words, buttering me up and stuff.
When I first started seeing your posts, I mostly see you on LinkedIn, and you just have such an honest voice. Have you always been that way?
You know, I've been that way, and I didn't know it was a thing. So I'm neurodivergent. It's even hard to say that now. It's on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And, that's probably why I just, I couldn't talk the way I wanted to talk for so long. So now that I can, and I learn people's emotions. I don't have a whole bunch. And so I learned, oh, that's mean. Let me stop,
It's such a pleasure to meet you because what I've always assumed what you're doing is just talking about the world the way you see it. And, it's maybe similar to why I post the way I do and try to be like authentic and honest because I'm trying to share the world the way I see it. And then by sharing it, hopefully show the difference between how I see it and how I would like it to be.
Man, that says it perfectly because the way I see things is gonna be way different than you or my colleagues are gonna see it.
I feel the exact same way. Like somebody has to talk about these things. Just the whole like work harder, go faster, grin and bear it is not. It's not working anymore. Maybe it never did. Maybe it did for a time. I don't know. But certainly in my career, I've seen it only worsen and worsen.
It's not working, and I think we might be around the same age. As I graduated from medical school in '05, and when we were doing residency, I remember the tides were changing then with the work hours.
Yeah.
I remember in particular, I was on call for my peds rotation, and the attending asked me, it was at 30 hours, 30 is hours when you're supposed to quit. The attending said, "We need you to see one more patient," and this is the cost for if you do a good job. That's when I learned it's not good to do a good job. It should be mediocre so I don't get asked to do more, but I had to do a good job. I stuck out like a sore thumb. I was the only Black doctor, and I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but he called on me the most.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had to be good. And I remember staying over in the chair seeing me, and he yelled. He was furious. "You got to get out of here. You can't be here past 30 hours." And that's the beginning of them trying because residency was crazy for me. I remember delivering a baby and taking care of a STEMI at the same time. I remember that. I'll never forget that.
And Pamela, you're a family trained physician and you practice in the ERs. Is that right?
Yep, yep, because, I started off with private practice, but when I was in residency, I always moonlighted in the ER because I was poor, not even poor, just po. So I was like, I had to work, and so I remember at one point having 3 jobs. I could worked in the office during the day, then I worked at
Wow.
the ER in the night, and on the weekends, the ER and the urgent care. So I found out a little bit before the pandemic that the ER they started to get more desperate and they began to pay a lot more, and then they had a sign-on bonus. And so I did the math and I was like, I didn't leave the office. My patients were very upset, and some of them still find me, but I had to do what I had to do.
Were you naturally drawn to emergency medicine, or was it really a practical, "Hey, they're paying, I can do this work because I'm a family doc, I know how to do this?"
I realized I liked it better because I have a short attention span. I have the attention span of an ant, and so, when patients would I don't wanna say drone on, but it was droning on about all the things and the stuff, I would get lost in the story because that's what ADHD is.
Yeah,
In the ER, it was just, "And this one, and this one, and this one," and I was
yeah.
like, "Oh, I feel at home."
As a family trained physician that works in the ED, what is the leg up or the extra skills or perspective that you have that you got from family medicine that maybe I don't have as somebody that went to an emergency residency myself?
The whole perspective that on most days, probably, I don't know, 80% of what we're doing is primary care,
Yeah.
probably more, and just understanding, like, what actually happens? Because I think some of my colleagues are like, I'm not gonna treat him." I'm like, "Well, he's just gonna be right back here. He's gonna be right back here the day after tomorrow and the day after that." So I think that's the leg up, and then because I would have colleagues who would say, "Why don't you just go see your primary?" And if only. Primary
Yeah.
doctors are dropping like flies. I
Yeah.
mean, especially rural areas, as I work in some rural areas. I work well, now I'm more on staff at an urban area because the rural hospital after the cuts of this year, I know it's gonna be a bloodbath, and I don't wanna be
Yeah,
around
I
to
do
see
too.
it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I
that's
completely agree.
that's how I end up in ER, and, also, I didn't like, being on call at all.
Yeah.
I notice now not many doctors are on call. Like, when I'm working in ER, I'm trying to call whoever's on call, there's no exchange.
Yeah, it does feel like it's changing how many specialties are even available in many parts of the country as well. Pamela, there's so many stories and topics we could talk about. Maybe I'll start with pay transparency. Why are you so transparent?
So, when I think about the people I work with, so I work a lot with African American female doctors. I work with all female doctors, but mainly female doctors. We all have the same issue. Female doctors are more likely to get divorced than male counterparts because men don't grow up going, I want to marry a female doctor, but a lot of women grow up going, I want to marry a doctor. That's put in your brain. But a female doctor can be a turnoff. It can be uh, not the prize. You're not paying attention solely to your partner. The gender roles are turned on their heads, especially if you make more. So I know a lot of people like that. I hear this story over and over, and a lot of imbalance, and it causes problems in the relationship aspect where there may be infidelity, and that's cited as a reason why. And so I know female physicians who are paying alimony. So that's why I post that type of thing, because that's the type of thing that people I work with are going through. And so I post that, and also women so worry about if the kids are going to be okay. I know that I worried if I was working too much, are they going to be okay? I worried about when I was having marital issues, getting a divorce. Are they going to be okay?
Well, and I find if you can talk about it, you can, I think so many things are so secretive. And certainly my conspiracy theory specifically around pay transparency is that it started out as like, oh, we're a profession. We're above talking about money, or that the kind of the holders of the secret scrolls of medicine didn't want to feel like what we do is make money from our practice. We're like above that. But nowadays, I almost think the lack of transparency is intentional to keep us separated and keep us kind of controlled and in our lane or something as well.
I would bet money on that. I really do believe it's to separate and not have any unity. Also, um, there's no fairness in it. There's no real system, and it should be, if you're qualified, you make this, it should be fair. But and if there's room for negotiation, I get if you're a better negotiation, but to have the disparities be what they are right now, there are some statistics that say, the average Black female can make 100,000 less than her white male counterpart, even when you match for the same profession. And I have a theory of why that is, but that shouldn't be.
Yeah. What's your theory?
Well, when African Americans graduate medical school, they tend to go work in African American communities, and a lot of times that is, it can be a federally qualified health center, and
Sure.
those places tend to pay less, and so that's kind of the price you pay for doing the same job, but in a place that's altruistic. It also, burns me up when people are saying things like, healthcare should be free, as if doctors should work for free. That's not possible.
Yeah, I absolutely could see that. Yeah, I mean, giving back to your community, especially if your community is more marginalized, making that choice is going to reflect on your pay, and it may reflect on your entire career's pay. Especially, we've seen this with the data with all female positions as well. If you're starting out your first years in attending lower than a male position, you may never catch up.
Yes, and we have our traditional gender rules, things like that, and where women are taught, "Hey, they offered you a job, great." Where, a lot of my male counterparts are like, "What else is it? Do I get loan repayment? Do I get?"
Yeah.
There's so many things to ask, and right now, I advise anybody I work with, ask for extra. We're in a shortage right now. You're in a position of power. You don't know it, but behind your back, they're fighting for you.
Yeah.
There's just not enough at all.
I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Savaro. If you've ever waited and waited for a neurologist to call you back, you know the problem that Savaro was built to fix. Savaro is a physician-led telestroke and neurology company that delivers rapid virtual neurology coverage that's reliable. Their board-certified neurologists connect by video in under 45 seconds, and they stay with you through the entire decision-making journey. Hospitals working with Savaro report faster door-to-needle times, fewer unnecessary transfers, and measurable improvements in patient outcomes. If your hospital needs stronger, faster, more consistent neurology coverage, visit Savaro.com to learn more. A quick word about today's sponsor, Evidently. Their platform turns an ocean of fragmented clinical data into concise, actionable insights. Chart summaries, note drafting, denial appeal support, HCC capture, so you spend time caring, not chasing. A transplant surgeon at a large academic medical center recently took transplant referral review from 2 hours to 20 minutes with AI-assisted chart review from Evidently. Physicians deserve workflows that improve accuracy, reduce exhausting chart biopsy, and help us practice at the top of our license. If you want to see how this might work in your hospital or your department, go to evidently.com. That's evidently.com to get started today. you are in high demand, you should be able to tell them, hey, this is what my ideal would look like. How close can you get to that?
And then the other thing is, w what we lack now is that even if you worked in the African American community years before, 'cause I have colleagues, I have friends, my person who inspired me to be a doctor, she owned her own practice and did well because she owned her own practice, and this was in the '80s and '90s, and now you can't own your own practice, it's so difficult. I see people doing it, I see more people choosing to do it, but it takes a lot. I think that would address the pay disparity too, because if you were running your own business, there's so much grift in all the administration, and especially, when we look at how insurance companies are like Standard Oil was in 1900, a complete monopoly, and I'm like, "Nobody's talking about breaking this up?" You can't set the price and then pay the price too, it's a circle.
Yeah, totally. Pamela, you posted a story on LinkedIn about pay transparency, asking a colleague what they were making and then realizing you were underpaid and then negotiating a significant raise the same day. Walk me through what happened. How did you feel when you were talking with your colleague, and how did that discussion go with your boss?
Both shocked and grateful. And so she's still a good friend to this day. But and this I had a couple of instances like this. So uh when I was one of my very first jobs, I had a private practice job and I was in office, and my friend Sarah said, we just having lunch in her office, and she's like, "How much do you make?" And I was taught, like, you don't talk about that. It's like talking about
That's right. Yeah,
your
yeah.
your personal sexual life or something. It's
Yeah,
that
it's like
invasive.
money, religion, politics, yeah.
Exactly, that's how I was
Yeah.
raised, and I was like, "We can't talk about that," and she was like, "No, we're gonna talk about it." She really pushed
Oh,
back.
wow.
Yeah, she
She
was like
doubled down. Yeah.
yeah, she did, and, because her father was a doctor, and I think she really understood money in a way I did not, and she understood the system in a way I did not, and I told her what I make, and she says, "That's BS," and she threw her stethoscope down on the ground. She's like, "You're more experienced than me," and, she's like, "Do you have any problems, any drug, alcohol?" And I said, "No, no issues, nothing on my license," and she's like, "Well, you need to go back into the chairman's office, chairman, and you need to ask for a raise," and she says, "Are they paying your loans?" I said, "No," and she says, "And they need to pay loan
Yeah,
repayment,"
of
and
course.
I was like, "I can't do that, I might get fired," I was afraid. But she pushed me, really pushed me, and I did it, and it was like, "Oh, yeah, sure, no problem." It was nothing. She was just looking down, signing papers. She's like, "Sure, no problem. Well, yeah, we'll add loan repayment and we'll increase it on the next check." And so that was one instance, and another instance, my good friend Randy, she said, "Oh, great, you got hired." She's like, "Did you get the sign-on bonus?" I was like, "What sign-on bonus?" And she's like, "The sign-on bonus, because 'cause they're so desperate and everything's so short. It's a 75,000 sign-on bonus." I said, "No, and I already signed the contract." And she cursed, and she said, "Well, rip the mother effer up." And I was like, "You can't do that."
Shout out Randy.
Yes, I will forever love her. And she said, "Rip it up." I said, no, I can't do that." She's like, "Well, tell them you won't show up until they pay that."
Yeah.
"You can do that? You can do that." So I called the recruiter back, I told her my concerns, and over the phone, she's like, "Oh, yeah, we didn't do that? Oh, yeah, yeah, you get a sign-on bonus." It was 48 hours, and it was in my bank account.
Wow.
I just looked at it like 70 wow, and that's when I became so vocal amongst my friend group.
Yeah.
I'm like, "We have to talk about this."
How rampant do you think these kinds of pay discrepancies are across medicine, especially for Black women?
Has to be rampant, especially you see black
Yeah.
women, a lot of times we stay in our silos. My friend group is multicultural. I go across all spectrums, so I'm talking to all kinds of people. And so if you don't diversify your group, your network, then you don't know what other things are possible. I say that so that's true in medicine, but that's also true with right now, there are so many ways to be a physician. I never knew.
Pamela, for someone who's about to sign a contract, but they don't know what number is fair, what can or what should they do?
First and foremost, I learned this a long time ago. You want to get a contract lawyer. You want to know what you're signing because you don't want to get stuck in something to where you have to go, but you can't. Or I know people who have had to pay their hospital back. You want to make sure you understand what you're signing. And number two, know that right now, as a physician, generally speaking, there's a shortage, so you're in demand. I would not if I'm a new grad, I'm getting my loans repaid, point blank. And there are too many places that will do that right now. No need for you to worry about that. And finding out what the right number is, you do the research. You see
Yeah.
what's going on because what's being paid in Chicago is not the same as what's being paid in Missouri. And the places that are going to pay the best are the places that are considered undesirable. Like Missouri pays pretty well because it's undesirable. Nobody says, I want to move to Missouri, but I'm already here. I live here. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah.
If I'm someone who doesn't like to rock the boat, I, I'm, I don't want to take up too much space. What do you tell that person who's like, I don't like to cause conflict. I don't like to ask questions. What do you tell that person who's maybe even like a younger version of Pamela Buchanan?
That's exactly so when you see me writing, I'm writing to myself with things I wish I
Yes.
knew.
Yes.
So that's, exactly where the space where my head is when I'm writing. And so I wish I would have known that it's okay to take up space. In fact, please do. And then understand that you bring a unique perspective and a unique set of skills to this organization you're going to. And so it never is disrespectful. It's not necessarily rocking the boat. I think at this point, employers expect it. You need to ask questions about pay, equity, the fairness of schedules, all the things, because at the end of the day, this is a life you're going to have to live, and you don't want to create a prison that you don't love.
Yeah. I try to remind myself that other groups of people besides physicians have no problem with this, and it's like you said, it's expected of them. Whether it's a hospital administrator, they're going to oh, they have to come in on a weekend. They're going to expect that's part of their pay package, that's acknowledged. Nurses, I think, are way better at this than physicians are. It is something weird about doctors, I think, as the culture of doctors that also puts us at a disadvantage too.
And then I wonder, conspiracy theory, is that on purpose? Because what
Yeah.
what I notice is that nurses are far better at business acumen than I've seen
Yes.
physicians be. Nurses are more likely to go after these leadership positions, I mean, become CEOs of hospitals and whatnot versus doctors. So I think doctors get into this, oh, I've reached, the top of the mountain and there's nothing more. But that is not,
Mm,
that's it's only the middle, really, being a doctor.
yeah.
It used to be, sometime far before you and I were born, where being a doctor could, I guess, make you wealthy. And then, even now, just talking about money as a doctor, it felt away. And I think it's ridiculous. I think that if there's anybody who shouldn't have to worry about money and be financially secure, it's the person who can, not that I'm God, but there's been times where I held life and death in my hands. And so, and the sacrifices you make, um, from a family standpoint, some things that I've missed and I regret.
That's right.
So I think it's unfair to think that doctors shouldn't talk about money.
Besides the pay gap, what are some of the other structural barriers you feel that exist for Black physicians?
Of course, there's going to be the bias that some people refuse to admit exists. There's bias amongst us all. I've had my bias and I check it. I'm more likely to check it because I have been discriminated against.
Yeah.
And so, I recognize it when I do it. And if someone comes in unhoused, immediately think he's not telling the truth or something like that. I check it and I go put that in the back of your head and act like it's your brother. But there's the racism, the lack of opportunity to get into leadership, and for Black female physicians, a higher rate of depression, burnout, and
Mm.
suicidality.
I remember you wrote a piece. This was, I don't know, this was probably like 6 months ago. You wrote about, I think someone either saying a really derogatory word towards you or not expecting that you would be a good doctor or something because of your gender, the color of your skin.
And that's one of those points I use a lot in my keynotes. But um, if it's not sexism, it's racism. I experience one every shift, and it sounds cryptic, but it's true. And that's why I started writing those Black History facts, because I was like, why is it? What is it about Missouri? It's the place. It's the place of the Missouri Compromise. It's where the Dred Scott case was decided. The courthouse. I drive by it all the time, where these things were decided. So a particular story that that really shocked the nurses more than it shocked me was during the COVID pandemic. This guy came in. He was very sick. You can tell that's by the time he got to the middle of the epidemic, you were like, oh yeah, that's COVID.
I know
You get
exactly what this is. Yeah, yeah.
you know. And so he was like, I don't have COVID. You have COVID. I was like, no sir, you have COVID. He was a middle-aged Caucasian male, and he was a smoker. He smelled bad. He looked older than what he was. And as I came in, I said, "You have COVID." He was on the phone with someone, and he says, "The N-word doctor said I have COVID." He said it very loud, and
Like intentionally louder than he needed
yeah,
to. Yeah, yeah.
the whole ER heard it, and the nurses, you could hear their their gasp. So it was a big deal, and I told the nurses to all calm down. It's not my first time, which is sad. It
Yeah.
wasn't the
Yeah,
first
of
time,
course.
and I said, "I'm just gonna take care of him anyway." And what I did was, I did, what we were doing back there. I think he got remdesivir and some breathing treatment, some steroids. He felt better. As he was getting um, admitted to the floor, he looked at me and he says, "I'm sorry, I don't normally talk like that." And I said, "Sir, let's be honest. You are like that. That's how you talk."
I was gonna say like that. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
and I told him, I said, "Do better." That's all I told him. In our system, there's 2 Black doctors. There's me in the ER, and there's 1 hospitalist, and we were
Mhm.
both working that day. And so I admitted her to the floor, and it turns out she was the admitting doctor. She called me,
Mhm.
and she's like, "What did you send me?" And I say, she's like, "This man called me the N-word."
Yeah,
And I said, "Well, he just got through telling me that he's not like that." But so that's not an isolated story. During the
yeah,
pandemic, it really stoked the fires of that, and people became more outwardly racist.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, the difference between unspoken bias and, discrimination versus outward, very obvious bias and very obvious discrimination are
Yeah,
very different. Yeah.
I get a lot of the unspoken bias. There's you get the very obvious shock look, like, so you're the doctor. So wait a minute, you're the
Mm.
doctor. Yes, I am the doctor. Doctor, like say doctor. So I wear
Yeah,
my doctor uniform because a lot of times without it, my male colleagues can wear jeans and what do you call it, scrub top.
yeah.
And no one questioned. I have a colleague who dressed like no one would question that he was a doctor. I dare not. It's always scrubs or either business casual and a lab coat with my ID. And I feel like the stethoscope is an extra layer of I am the doctor because it just goes over people's head.
Pamela, how does having a Black physician in the room actually change outcomes for Black patients? What does the data show, and how do you think we get there structurally as a system?
Well, studies have shown that specifically Black male doctors are more likely to do what they're told to do and take the advice from their Black male doctors, so Black
Mm,
males. And it's unfortunate because we're going in the wrong direction. There are fewer
yeah,
Black male doctors now than even I read a statistic not too long ago, the 40s. So, yeah, so that's the wrong way. And what happened to there's the ease. Because think about the history. It's not that long ago that we had the Tuskegee experiment where, on purpose, the government experimented and gave people a disease that causes a lot of problems.
yeah. Not just a rogue group of a bunch of racist white doctors. Like the federal government
The government,
decided this
yeah.
was acceptable. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. And so and so patients still hold that. It's passed on from their grandfather, and they don't trust you. And so I have patients that when they see me in the room, they get elated. I had a patient who I treated, and they see me and they start telling people and start coming and going, "When are you working?" I was like, "This is not my office practice." And how do you time your emergency?
yeah, yeah.
you know, but it's just that being seen and understanding culturally. So there's that. The same could be said about a female doctor. Like a
Yep.
female doctor doing a pap smear is more likely to warm the speculum.
I think just maybe a patient has can see maybe a little bit more of themselves in you, or vice versa, and just being able to picture yourself as them or them as you changes that relationship in a way that I think is probably often unspoken, but just there's just that little extra, it's not something that's going to be measured in a metric. It's very qualitative, but I think many times you can feel it in the room when you're there.
You can feel it, and try as you may, I have friends who, are great allies, but still a patient wouldn't open up, and we might switch cases because I think you might be better in here, and that's right, and it's big of them to understand that.
Tell me about Melanated Medicine, the peer support network you founded for Black women physicians. Why did you feel the need to create it?
Well, you know what? Black female physicians have a whole different subset of problems than the other groups. We were just talking about it. I'm in a group for women physicians because women physicians have a set of problems that are different from male. Because there's the second shift. You work and you come home and you got to do dinner. You have to clean up, or you're taking care of the home, which is what many women experience until we learn that we have to take better care of themselves. And then you also realize, hey, I'm a high earner. I can get some help with these things. I think I got mid in my career before I realized I needed help. No, I started going through a divorce, and help was the best thing that I got. Someone cleans the house, I don't do laundry, and I have a nanny. And even now my kids are teenagers, I still keep the nanny. I was like, you just make sure that I don't miss what. And then she's like, Zealand he has a girlfriend now. Okay, thank you. That's why I need you. Just, just keep the shenanigans down. And so that's what it is for women, that whole second shift. Then also, when we don't speak up, you need to tell your partner, because I'm always telling them, babe, I need some help. Just last night over dinner, I was like, I'm feeling a kind of way. I'm pushing out some other things and doing these workshops and speaking more. I got it. That's like, I am overwhelmed. That's what's happening. I was like, there's something. I'm overwhelmed. And so I need some help. Years ago, I would not have asked for help. And by being in community with other women, you realize that I am just like them. My problem is not unique. Oh, how are you solving your problem?
You don't feel so alone with the challenges.
Right. How are you navigating being a doctor plus a wife plus a mother?
I think you just calling out that it's okay to both ask for help and hire help is probably blowing a lot of listeners' minds right now, because those two things are not typically associated with medicine, and probably not with women as well, right? Like I think those are some of the maybe the cultural stereotypes of those groups too.
I am, I'm a lady, but I think like a man. And then when I think about my hourly effective weight, or, my hourly effective rate, if I think about what I could bring in doing something else versus cooking and cleaning, then it's a no-brainer. If I pay somebody $250 to clean the house, what could I have made in 4 hours? I could have made thousands.
Yeah, I'll still remember this. I think the chair of surgery at the VA where I was a med student, and I said, "Well, aren't you working so many hours?" And I'll never forget this. She said, "Yeah, but Graham, I don't do the laundry. I pay for the things that I don't want to do. I can afford to, I'm a surgeon, I work really hard, but the things I want to do, I do. And I just pay somebody to do the laundry." And that blew my mind that someone could just be like, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to just ask." Essentially, she was asking for help. She's hired help because she's like, "Yeah, not only do I need the help, I don't want to do that. So I'm just not going to do it."
Right, not gonna do it. And it's like, we don't think like that. And, and also physicians are bred. I don't know if you went through this in residency and conferences you go to, we're bred to be very frugal. Like, that is
Yes.
the
Yeah,
way.
it's a scarcity mindset. It starts in med school and then in residency, to the point that still, I think so many of us are like, "Oh, there's free food somewhere in the hospital. I will
Right.
do anything for a slice of pizza." How sad is that?
Extremely sad. You're a doc, and it's food you probably shouldn't be eating,
Shouldn't be eating in the first
just
place, but it's free, therefore it's somehow better than anything else. Yeah. Well, I just want to commend you for, also just talking about mental health and depression openly. Again, yet another taboo topic that Pamela Buchanan's like, no, 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 we're going to talk about this openly.
we're gonna openly talk about mental health because how in the literal hell do you expect me to be okay with the kinds of
Yeah.
things that I have seen?
Yes.
I've seen a man who was burned so badly that he looked like a charcoal briquette, and I cannot barbecue on charcoal. We had to get a pellet grill. It reminds me of him. And I have seen someone who was near decapitated as I'm trying to intubate. It was like a horror movie.
Yeah.
Okay, that's trauma. Now, on that call, the other people involved, they got to go to therapy. Like the paramedic, the fireman, they had to stay off mandatory therapy. That's not a thing in medicine. How is that not a thing? How is no one checking periodically to see if the doctor is mentally okay? But the profession where I'm supposed to figure out life and death decisions, we're not doing that. And quite frankly, when we start talking about that, it enrages me. And
Yeah.
that makes me mad because when I was suffering, nobody was there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that nobody was there for you, Pamela. Do you watch The Pit at all?
Yes, I watched The Pit the day before therapy because it's triggering.
I find it really cathartic that I feel seen, that someone actually is like saying and showing the things that I have seen and had to go through. And then the other really common thread I've seen online is like the partners or the family of an ER doctor or a nurse or something are saying like, is this like really what it's like? And people are like, yeah, kinda. And it just gives them a perspective that is it kind of like pulls back the curtains on something that we maybe just say like, oh, I had a bad shift today, and we can't really describe exactly what that means. And finally, our families are starting to get some flavor of what a bad shift or good shift feels and looks like.
I love it that my family can watch that, and they're like, "Mom, is it like that?" Like, "Babe, is it like that?" I was like, "For sure."
Pamela, in our last few minutes, I've got some lightning round questions for you. You ready?
Okay, let's go.
If you could put one Black physician story in every med school curriculum tomorrow, whose would it be and why?
Well, I think that people don't know about, Charles Drew, that he did blood banking, but he also worked on talking about diversity and disparities in hypertension. And so there used to be a time when certain diseases were thought of as just a Black disease, but he
Mm,
put reasoning behind it and, the science. So I think he should be highlighted more.
I love that. The number one lesson you wish every physician knew about negotiating fair pay.
So the number one lesson I wish every physician knew about negotiating fair pay is that first number is never the final number. It's not. There's more where that came from, and if you understand you have skills and certifications that are so in demand, then you would fight more for what you deserve.
I love it. Pamela Buchanan, thank you so much for being here today with me on How I Doctor.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.